Ladies and gents, welcome back to From Losing to Cruising. What you just saw there was Mark and I impersonating this baboon, because Mark said that he feels like he's been playing a bit like one recently due to a downswing that has just occurred. Downswings are inevitable, but Mark, this one seemed to sting a little bit more than usual. So what do you think is going on?
There may be different factors, but one I think was that I play on another format. So I play on an app which isn't on the poker tracker, and it's a game, it plays like live. It's a very soft game, and I've been able to win at it for a while, and I was losing concurrently with this. I lost probably a similar type of downswing on that site, and I know I'm a winning player on that site, so it normally that would never affect me on that site. I take the swings, and I know in the long run it's things are going fine. But together with this, it impacted me, and I started making bad decisions, I could tell, and that's when I stopped at the end of that. I think I had a 2 or 3 buy-in swing down, and I just said, okay, I need to stop playing today, because I could feel myself making bad decisions. I think the very first time we're going to look at is possibly one where this leak that I think I have, where I just over-aggress, where I just want to shove it in, and it may not be appropriate. So looking forward to checking that.
Yeah. And what mental program do you think is running the show when you do that? What is that mental program trying to achieve for you?
It's an element of frustration. It's a entitlement. It's a feeling that this shouldn't be happening. I thought I was past this, and it's all of those sort of, it's emotion rather than calculation.
Yep.
And what I found was that the checks that there's a few hands, not the first one, but a couple of the other hands where the protocol check where I have to assess, is villain bluffing enough here, or is this an under bluff note? I completely bypassed that. So I had been doing it pretty okay, I felt, up until this point, and that's why I stopped playing, because I recognized that I didn't check. I completely bypassed. I went back to the old way of playing, and I need to stop playing because of that. So good to recognize it, but it just felt shit that I fell back into that. But
yeah,
I think it's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, there are ebbs and flows in our mental game, just as in like our level of technical performance, and there'll be days when we just like utterly lose our mind, like way more than we even thought we were still capable of, and it sounds like that's what's happened a little bit here. How do you quantify this in like the grand scheme of things? Like, how are you seeing your poker journey at this point in time? How positive, frustrated, optimistic, pessimistic are you about that?
I think on balance, I think I'm fine. I know I'm making progress. So I think if I zoom out, I can see the progress. I think it's just, it's a rut, and I'm disappointed that I fell into the rut, but I'm happy that I was able to step away and say, I recognize that I'm not playing optimally right now, and I'm not sure why that is, but I know I should just stop, because that was a bad decision, and that after another bad decision a few minutes ago. So I recognized the pattern and said I need to step away, because I'm not playing the way I should be playing. So
yeah,
I'm playing a C game basically, and I need to stop playing C games, so just stop playing. And I think the way I've typically dealt with downturns in the past has been to do that. When it got to the point where I knew I was making bad decisions, to just stop and like maybe study for a couple of days, go back over the hands, and then come back at it with a fresh mind. And the chart always just goes the other way. It always turns back up, is what I found in the past. So it's worked for me in the past. So I know I'm trying to rinse and repeat that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, sometimes it won't. There will be a time when you come back and you do everything right, and variance is like, nope, decided you're still downswinging or whatever. So that can happen. But of course, you're infinitely more likely to have good results when you're playing your A game than you are when you're playing your C game over like an extended sample. So if you play like 10k hands playing your A game, you're much more likely to do well than if you're playing your C game in that stretch. Because yeah, I was gonna just say one thing before we get into this ace king hand that everyone's dying to see. Poker is really grueling. I had a student last week actually come to me and say that they wanted to quit the game, that they just couldn't handle it. It was stressing them out. It was maddening. They'd bought a bunch of coaching. They'd bought CPS at Carrot Poker School and stuff like that. They'd begun working through it all, but they just thought, you know what? I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm just out. And they were like, can we work something out for the coaching sessions or whatever? Can I sell them on to someone else and blah, blah, blah. So this is not uncommon. This happens all the time, because while most people who sort of come to me for coaching and stuff are quite far along the path these days, or they're at least like dedicated and they kind of know what to expect, there are some people who just cannot tolerate it. I think that you're quite gritty. I think you've got a good resistance for this stuff, and you need to have that. And I think you're someone that will keep coming back. But I do want to say that for anybody, yourself included, that's you know, taken on a pursuit like this to go from nothing in the poker world, from a brand new fledgling poker player to trying to be a winning player at online 50NL. That is very, very, very difficult. Like, don't let the people who brag with graphs like, hey, just started 6 months ago, look at my graph. That's super rare. A lot of them are faked. Like, you only hear about the real, like, miracle stories there. You don't hear about the thousands, tens of thousands of poker players that rock up and get beaten up for 2 years and then just run away with their tail between their legs. You don't see that, but that's actually the norm. So I just want to say that to the audience, and for you, that is the norm, to get the shit beaten out of you and to quit. That's the norm. It's not the norm to stick it out, get a graph that's losing, gradually lose less, then break even, then slowly win, still hit downswings and bumps in the road along the way, and then become a winning player. That is not the norm. That is a tiny, infinitesimally small percentage of poker players that start from nothing. So that maybe that helps, I don't know, but it's a very hard thing to do.
That's good to hear. And I'm resolved to doing what I can on my side to make sure that I'm on the right side of that.
Yep, because what we could actually do here is we could take this graph and we could actually go back to like all dates and we could look at what's happened overall. And overall, like, we do actually see a leveling off of your losses, and that's what we would expect right now. You came to me as a losing player on the site. You came to me with like a lot of holes in your game and not very much technical grounding, and we've stabilized it, and I'm okay with stabilizing it. Like, I don't expect much more than that at this point. I'm not expecting you to just suddenly be like, poof, crushing, like, from losing. It's just unrealistic for any poker player, apart from some rare genius.
Like, is that the whole chart? I don't think that's the whole chart even. That's only the hands I've sent you since we started training.
Exactly, that's just since we started training. Before that, you were losing heavily as well, right? Like, before this stretch. So it's really,
as a stretch, this is unprecedented in my poker career. So,
and it wouldn't be objectively fair to sit here and be like, I'm not winning. Wow, I'm not winning. This sucks. Like, I want to win, because like, you're playing in a game you're losing heavily in, then you're losing less heavily, and now you're basically, it looks like you've reached the break-even point now, which is a milestone and a very good achievement. We had a video called Checkpoint 1. We were breaking even a while back, where we first acknowledged this, and this downswing that you've just gone through, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge deal, right? It's actually quite small, and we can regroup from it very easily, and I think you've done the right thing by not compounding it. I am concerned with the red line, like, deeply concerned with it. I think it's long term. The reason that things aren't great is that while you have obviously started folding more because your blue line is taking this big uptick, and that's been great for you, you're not spewing and stacking off in half the spots you previously were, but in doing that, you're also not winning enough pots, you're not being aggressive enough, you're not making the right bets at the right sizes at the right times, and that's what's causing the red line to dive bomb like this. So the next phase is to keep folding in the spots where we're folding and keep this blue line stabilized, but also work on winning more pots and aggression. And in our next episode, we're going to look at times where you didn't aggress, where you could have, and we're going to do a red line sort of fix session next time. But today, we're going to investigate your downswing. We're going to see, how did it go? Were the hands your fault? Were they not your fault? Let's get into that now. So let's get into this. Ace King here. Okay, so we open, and on the button, we get a 3-bet from the big blind, and we 4-bet all pretty standard stuff so far. Villain calls, we have a 4-bet pot to play. I think using small sizing here with a lot of your ranges, or all of your ranges, is just a normal thing to do, and it's a good simplification. I won't talk too much on that. 10 of clubs on the turn. And yeah, this is one of the kind of weird spots where usually in a 4-bet pot, the turn sizing on most boards will be 1/3 again, like theoretically. And that's just because SPR you don't need to go bigger, and there's no reason to usually cause like a big filtering in your opponent's range. You can make a lot of hands indifferent usually for 1/3, and usually jamming turn in these spots is actually a little bit of an indifference kind of error where you're not causing enough hands to be indifferent for that cheaper price. But here with double flush draw, you can actually consider jams, because the double flush draw just gives villain a bit more sort of equity for you to deny. There's king, jack, ace, jack, there's some hearts, there's some clubs, there's some pair plus draw like jacks or nines. I think playing shove as your sizing on this turn makes a ton of sense, and with double flush draw connected boards in 4-bet pots, I would like to see jam being the turn size instead of the default 1/3. That's the theoretical point. Now I'll get your take on what you were actually thinking. So just because I've said jam is like the sizing you should use if you decide to jam, I'd still like you to analyze what you think of this play, and more importantly, what you think about the thought process that led to this play. Let's try and retrace it.
I think my thought process was that I have aces, kings, ace, queen, king, queen. I have a lot of value hands here.
Okay, stop a second. You should not have ace, queen. You should be flatting that because it's too good button versus big blind to use as a 4-bet bluff. You could have it in earlier position. You wouldn't 4-bet ace queen button versus big blind, I would hope. You'd flat.
Yeah, okay.
It's middling. Same with king queen.
Yeah.
You don't really 4-bet that in these particular positions, but you could have, it's possible you could have 4-bet bluffs that do connect with the queen, maybe like queen jack, maybe king queen off is in there sometimes, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. And basically I felt I have a lot of top hands on this flop. I have a lot of value and I need bluffs. And ace king is, you know, even if it's behind, it has pair outs against a lot of hands that will call. And there's a lot of draws that I'm ahead of. So I felt that's why I shoved. Now, I thought afterwards that I was playing like a baboon, but...
Right, this is interesting then. So your thought process in game, how emotionally charged was it? How much did you desperately want to win this pot at the time?
I can't remember exactly. I won't lie. I can't remember exactly, but I remember feeling afterwards, feeling shit. Was that a mistake? And not confident that that was the right play to make, basically. And that caused me to feel that I was not playing. The feeling afterwards was very results oriented.
Yeah.
And it was also a bit of like, what the fuck is he calling with what he called with, right?
Okay.
And that got me as well, where I felt, what the fuck? How does he have that hand here?
Okay, right. So there's a lot to unpack here. This is all fantastic.
That was the gist of it.
Yeah, this is fantastic from a coaching standpoint. There's so much to glean from this. This is multifaceted. First thing is, during the hand, you seem to have a fairly rational thought process. You don't remember massive feelings of pot attachment here or anything like that. It'd be very important to pay attention to those and try to notice them if they are there in future, because they're very telling about your mental state at the time of this kind of hand. Another thing I could say here is that this play theoretically is just fine. Like, I mean, jamming here is a size you can use. As you say, you're meant to have bluffs. There's no reason to think this is losing because you're basically just semi-bluffing. You have outs, like villain can clearly have like jacks, nines, hands that they can fold here, an 8 of some description sometimes, pocket 7s, I don't know. I can just see hands that can fold here, so I have no problem. There's also just lots of like ace jack of hearts, ace jack of clubs that you could even get called by that you're ahead of. So in some sense, this is even a hybrid jam because it achieves like value elements and bluff elements, mainly the latter, but a little bit of both. So this jam is great. I have no problem with it at all. I think you want a bit more methodology in 4-bet pots where your default size is 1/3, not jam, but jam is okay on super wet textures that merge your opponent's range more. That's the key. They have more draws, they have more mergy hands. So jamming to deny equity a bit more instead of just betting 1/3 makes a bit more sense from our point of view. Now here's the interesting part. You went on a cycle here that I talk about in Poker Therapy, the book I wrote a couple of years ago, which is called Ouch, I Should Never Have. And Ouch, I Should Never Have is actually like a flow chart. All of these misfires, as I call them, the mental game leaks, they're flow charts. And they usually have inputs or triggers which come from your experience as a poker player here and playing this hand at the time. And then they have interpretations, and then they have sort of outcomes. And it's like a 3-stage thing. So here, the trigger is twofold. The trigger is on the first hand, feeling a bit unsure during the hand, and there's a bit of doubt and kind of like maybe a bit of dread, maybe not like totally ominous sort of despair yet, but like some kind of dread or doubt or just unsettled feeling, right?
Not confident.
Not confident. Exactly. Yeah. That's an input, and that's a very destructive input if you don't monitor it and watch it very closely. The second input here is the feeling of losing. So the feeling of being shown the 8-7 and then that hand obviously winning the pot from you and getting stacked, and the pain of that. Those two inputs are then taken together and the brain adds them up and says 2 + 2 is 112 and basically says, therefore I screwed up, therefore I played like a baboon. Baboon. I don't think you did play this hand like a baboon. I would say you played this hand completely fine, but the cycle, the mental game sort of leak, the cycle that followed that of like, ouch, I should never have done that. Of course I deserve this. Like, what's he doing? He's played this, you know, in a really spewy way. All of that stuff is compounded. It's all added together and it's made you formulate a really vague, destructive, emotional conclusion about your own play, which actually tears down the work we're doing on your game a little bit. It's actually like counterproductive. Would you agree?
100%, yeah, 100%. Because when you tell me all of that, you know, this is a mergy, this is a very wet turn, and therefore the right side, like my normal sizing here is a 1/3. But the reason I did it was probably not thinking in exactly those terms, but I felt this is a double flush draw. I need to have shoves here. I will have shoves for value, so I need to have shoves of bluff. So yeah, I did think that. I lacked the confidence, the conviction in that was actually true, and then the loss compounded. Yeah, I felt like what the, you know, particularly what, like, yeah, it hurt when he showed me that hand, because this guy is a reg at the stake.
So why do you think villain's play is bad, first of all?
I just didn't think he should be calling a 4-bet with that
Right.
hand. I didn't see. I thought he can have Queen X here, but I didn't think he'd have an 8 in any world.
I mean, it's okay to be shown something you didn't expect. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything was wrong and like everything is crazy and the whole world is alien. It's just one part of his range, so that's one thing. I think his play is fine here. I think 8-7 is the sort of hand that can flat a 4-bet. I don't think it's a massively winning thing to do. I don't think it's massively losing either. When you think about what you want to call a 4-bet with, it's live stuff, right? So you want to call like pocket pairs, and you want to call like suited connectors, and you want to call big dominating and survivable broadways. What you don't want to call is like maybe even like Jack 10 is in some sense worse than this because it's a bit more dominated and less live. And obviously you want to avoid calling like offsuit broadways and stuff like that to a 4-bet. Other than that though, there are lots of hands you can defend, and this is possibly just one of them. So I don't even mind villain's play at all in this hand. I think like the turn is a no-brainer call, the flop is a no-brainer call, and pre-flop is fine. So you're a bit surprised here, but I think with a bit more experience, you'll come to see this is all right. And also try to avoid that whole trap of just being like making his play more relevant than it is. Even if this was a mistake, it has really nothing to do with what just happened. And you have to ask yourself, in what way does it serve me to have these thoughts and these feelings about my opponent's play? Like, and why am I doing that? Why am I making it such a big deal what they did here? I think if you were in a rational frame of mind, you'd be less likely to go down that path. I think the fact that you're saying, you know, villain doesn't deserve this, they shouldn't have done this, they have wronged me in some way, it's kind of evidence of the vulnerable state of mind that you're in at this point, and it's good evidence that you should take a break and, you know, pause your session until you've regrouped, and you did that, so that's great.
Yeah, I think the issue was that I was primed, exactly that. I was primed that I was down a downswing, I'd already lost 9 buy-ins, and this was the 10th, and it was just... Yeah, that's exactly the mindset. I think you're right. If I was, you know, if I was bumbling along and this was a hand, this would just be a hand. And
exactly,
it was just what had happened in the preceding 9 buy-ins caused me to react to this and say, okay, I need to stop because I'm not feeling good about my game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're all capable of it. Like, we've all had moments where we just lash out in some childish kind of emotional way when things aren't going badly. Like, I've like, much to my shame, I've played chess before and I've been playing like a 5-minute game and I've been so angry that like I've just quit the game instead of resigning, or I've like let the time run down or something really childish like this. Like, if you go back a while, it's just like so petty and bad, but like we do get into these frames of mind where everything is just ad hominem. It becomes really personal and it becomes really like fight or flighty, and I think whenever we pick up on that, it's a good time to quit your session. Like, if you play for like 6 years and you quit sessions whenever you feel that way, you will have way better results than if you play for another 2 hours. Like, it will be night and day. It won't even just be like a little bit better. It'll be like what makes or breaks your career. So good choice to quit. We can't overstate that.
Yeah, we're going back in time now, so that was
okay.
Actually the last hand. So yeah.
Okay, fine. So we're going back to this one, which happened a bit before. Ace Queen offsuit, we open, and villain 3 bets and we call. So yeah, you're not 4-betting this combo, as I just said. This is a call. I'm glad this came up. It's a cool little example. Ace 10 deuce. Okay, 2-tone. Villain goes for 3rd pot. You can build raise here. You can click this back plus a bet if you want. You can just call if you want to not build raise. Building raise is quite difficult for them to deal with here, and they're not going to react very well, so I would recommend it at some point. I think it's a nice little addition, but you don't have to.
And if they 3-bet, you're folding?
No, you're probably not folding this, theoretically speaking, but we can make up our mind about the exploitative reality of that. It's not an integral part of the line to know what you're doing if they 3-bet. They usually won't 3-bet, and I don't want to put my students in a spot where like they feel like they need to know what they're doing next in order to take a play. This is a fallacy. I've heard, you know, baboon coaches and stuff over the years say things like, you have to have a plan before you bet. You need to know if you're bet folding or bet calling. You actually don't. You just need to know that like raising is a decent play with this hand for value, and you can do it, and there's a bit of useful fold equity, and then you can go from there. You can try and figure out like exploitatively what's going on if villain jams. It's a really rare line. You need to like explore it, but I wouldn't waste all my energy exploring it before I've even faced it, because you need to be efficient, you know. If you have time, you can plan ahead a bit if you're feeling like it, but don't shut yourself in a box where you're like, what am I doing next? If I don't know, I can't make this play. That's just not true. There's lots of times I value bet the river, and I have no idea what I'll do against a jam, but I hardly ever get jammed on in those spots, so who cares, right? Figure it out if we need to. Yep, I think you've got value beater still, meaning you're not just beating bluffs. I think this is a clear call. And this spot is, yeah, I mean, double Broadway texture here is probably a bit overbluffed, and I think you could still win against ace queen. So I mean, I think call is I mean, maybe not overbluff from big blind. It depends how they're constructing here and whether they're 3-betting the bluffs they need to 3-bet. But this is not an underbluff node generally, even at 50 zoom. This isn't like an underbluffed spot, so calling down here is fine. And I think they could jam ace queen maybe for value, though it does look a bit thin. Of course, like the 10 on the turn is maybe something we should talk about though, because unusual double Broadway that bricks, this is going to be fine. When the 10 has paired, it definitely scares the hell out of them, and we do see that paired turns that pair the second card are under bluffed by the river. So I just noticed the 10 was on the turn there, and that would affect things. But usually mass data sort of stuff would say call down if the turn is a 3 here or the turn is an 8 here. No problem. On the turn of the 10. Yeah, I think under bluffing is something that begins to come into it a lot more, because they just imagine you with like a bunch of trips, and it does shut down a lot of aggression from your opponents. So in any case, we call, and I'm guessing we lose. We have ace king. Okay, I don't think this is horrible or anything, and in theory there's nothing really wrong with this. It's just as maybe an exploit about noting that the paired second card turn is the kind of underbluffed spot here, just due to that sort of thought. Okay, at the time of the hand, what was different? Were you in some place or another here, and what do you think about that now?
At the time of the hand, I'm looking at his stats, and I was frustrated afterwards because I have a concern that this is my leak of calling too much. Part of that leak is that I look for something in the stats that convinces me I should call, and I did that here. Because this guy was aggressive. He was 24, 20, 10. I have 1,000 hands on him, and he had triple barreled a lot.
But how is that? That doesn't sound crooked or biased. Like if
I know. But
I know what you're saying though. It's your
and it's all the primed. You know, it's the primed mind.
Right. Okay. So you're being like ultra critical of yourself. Exactly. You're being like you're looking for ways to sort of just blame others, blame the reg in the last hand, blame yourself. You're just trying to like throw this sort of fury and indignation and pain. Downswings hurt, you know, and you're trying to throw that at people, at others, and you're trying to like bring causality to it at yourself. Yeah. So first off, like I call this lawyer tilt when the student searches for reasons that justify your underlying desire. I was working with a student a couple of weeks ago who has this, hopefully she won't mind me saying this, I will keep it anonymous, but she has this leak where basically there's like there's two like minds there. There's like one that's like a kind of logical train of thought that's like, okay, this factor, this factor, this factor, and she's actually quite good poker player. But then there's this other part that's just like desperate to invest money and never wants to fold and always wants to see if she can win the pot. And then there's like a thought that comes up there that's just like, but this, and then that's enough to press a button. Just one irrational thought towards calling is enough to make you call, even though there's all this like 5 or 6 really strong things in favor of folding, right? That's not what's happening here, but I wanted to bring that up, and I call that lawyer tilt, because it's like you give a lawyer a case and they have to win that case, even if it's a hopeless case. They're gonna like pull out everything they possibly can to try to win that if they've not just agreed a plea or whatever. Secondly, if you give a lawyer a really good case and the lawyer's just like, yeah, look, he's guilty, well, you can't really accuse the lawyer of being like lawyery about that. Okay, maybe they're putting some spin on it, but it's not like they're taking some flimsy case and spinning it. So here, you have a really good case to call down. It looks like you absolutely should call down. So I don't think this is you being a crooked lawyer or being like trying to twist this to justify your desire. Was there a desire there to call down at the time of the hand that you were desperate to justify?
No, I don't think so. No, it was that, but I was concerned because I know that was a leak of mine. I even contemplated then afterwards not playing with just shutting off the HUD if I want to continue playing, because I blamed this on the fact that I relied on some data to make a call, and that just reminded me of the old. I definitely had a leak that did that was part of my problem. Agreed. So it was in doing that, I reminded myself that, and then I blamed it on that. So yeah, I agree. I think it's very easy to be like, oh, this feels familiar in a bad way, in a way that used to be bad for me to behave. I must be doing it again. I think when you're running bad, there are a lot of things going on that are actually really punishing yourself. And I don't say this lightly, because after the session here and in the coming days and weeks, every bit of this like self-torture that you're putting yourself through is actually going to prolong the state of suffering, the downswing, the negative mental attitude, and it's going to inhibit your ability to play well in the forthcoming days, weeks, and sessions. Work on it. It's not directly costing you money, but it's worth fixing because it's going to make poker more enjoyable for you, and you're going to let yourself off the hook in a big way if you can fix it. And that's great, you know, to alleviate yourself of that stress. this is hugely valuable for me, because every time we do this, like this in the last hand, I then build a little more confidence in myself that I can say the next time I know I'm right, and just push on and don't punish yourself and don't torture yourself,
right,
and don't go off in that cycle. And I get more resilient by looking back over this and getting your feedback that no, this isn't bad. Then that will build my confidence and increase my resilience, I think.
Yeah, I think a really key skill as a poker player is to be able to separate into sort of different boxes the things that are not our, I don't like the word fault, like this mea culpa, I don't like that. I think it's extremely counterproductive and actually just toxic and harmful for your progress. So why not just differentiate two boxes, write these out, put them on your desktop, whatever you want to do. Have physical boxes with ballot boxes and put the hands in them that you've written down, whatever you want to do. Like this would really help. I know that sounds silly, but that would actually really help you file things away in a neat and sort of tranquil way in your brain so they don't come up and hurt you. But why not have a box that's like improvement possible here, or like this shines like sort of like the torch being shone on where the improvement can be made, where you've made a mistake, so like improvement possible, and then another box that's just like poker doing its thing. Poker being poker, you know, it's doing what it does. It's very often not your fault. This call down is fine. There's just exploitatively, it's one of these ones where theoretically it's good, or it's at least fine. Exploitatively, it's maybe slightly losing against pool, but now it's winning again against the likely opponent type, right? Based on what you know. So in the three different layers, it goes from like winning to losing to winning again or something. So yeah, it's fine. All right, we'll do this one. And then I'm keen to, we'll maybe do like this one, and then we'll move on to the next installment of the series, right? And we'll finish off we can either finish off those other hands, or we can move on to red line stuff, depending what we think is most pressing. I would like to look at red line with you quite soon, because it's a key problem. Not problem, area where improvement is possible. That's what I just said, right? That's what it is. Okay, kings, open, call, check, small bet. Okay, fine. You can big bet because the deuce is like irrelevant, right? As a pair, you can actually big bet this flop, but it's fine. Yeah, mandatory turn c-bet. You can overbet again because the deuce is irrelevant. You don't have to treat this like a normal paired flop where the pair is like a 7 or a 9 or a jack or something that's actually in your opponent's range. So you can do that. Call, queen, and check, and value bet. Thoughts so far?
I think so far it was fine.
I mean, it's a clear value bet, right? Villain doesn't have a lot of queen x or deuce x here. Yeah, I mean, if the queen was on the flop and then it pairs on the river, you have a check here. Absolutely. But when the queen is on the turn, it's been kind of not eradicated, but diminished by the action of bet, flop, and call, right? So the queen is definitely not something you have to fear bringing down your equity in a major way here. This is not a good river. It hurts your equity. It doesn't hurt it enough that this is now a check. So this is lovely by you so far. No problem. Okay, your thought process now, please. Let's do in-game mark, out-of-game mark, see if there's any differences. Let's do that whole caboodle.
In-game mark, just didn't see this as being... I thought this is very under-bluffed. Like, I've shown decent interest in the pot, and he's shoved, or she. So I just thought this is a fold.
That's what you thought in-game? So
I'm happy with it. I marked this hand just to go through it.
Yep.
Just to make sure that
I agree.
That thought process
I think it's all great. I mean, if you show this hand to like GTO boffins, they'll probably be like, oh, but you unblock all of the bluffs and you block the queen x, so you have to call. But actually, they're being baboons, because in this spot, we are basically dead a lot. It's very, very unattractive to jam as a bluff here for all humans. I know a lot of humans. I know a lot of poker player humans. Do you know how many of them would ever even consider bluffing in this spot? Like 0. Close to 0. The guy that's bluffing you here is killing you. He's over bluffing and he's shredding you to pieces when you fold. But the other 99 players out of 100 are not. So good fold. Good job. All right. One more, because that was a quickie. Sizing equals... Stack size equals weaker player, baboon. Call.
Yeah.
Half pot. Okay. Jam. Yeah, I don't mind. Fine. I don't have anything to say on this hand, do you?
Okay.
Call. I mean, you could call flop as well. It's close in position. Out of position, I'd certainly shove. I don't mind shoving. With that much left behind, though, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
C-bet. 7's here and deuce to 6. I think you can probably check as well. Most people don't ever check this hand, but you probably can. Depends on who villain is. The more passive they are, the more you just want to bet, though. 3 of spades, I think you can bet or check here. And river is a clear check against donk bet. Okay, this is another interesting facing bet node. Let's hear your analysis.
My analysis is that, again, I've shown a lot of interest. I've double barreled.
Like less on what you've shown, okay, because you're relying on
Yeah,
people
no,
like understanding that. But what does that mean for his range? The fact that you
I
have
think
bet
his
twice.
range is nutted.
Okay,
when
so his range when he
bets
calls
for
flop. Okay, so when he calls flop and then calls turn, what does that mean about his range at that point?
His range is condensed, and typically at my stakes, when someone does this on the river, it's a very nutted range. You know, when you've got a flush on board and a paired board, it's alarm bells, and this is a bluff catcher, and it's a fold.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there'll be some players here that are so volatile that they have all kinds of shit, but then I wouldn't even be shocked if they had like 8s or something sometimes, and I call and it's like, wow, they've made like a huge polarization error and I lose anyway or something. So yeah, I mean, while there will be the odd guy that's just like got 3-5 here and is just bluffing, or like 5s or something, or like maybe ace queen with ace of spades or something, it's gonna be quite rare, and something has sort of jolted villain awake into a line that they wouldn't necessarily usually take here. And I think that that is evidence that we should just be pitching this and just saying, you know what, this is probably just really underbluffed. Yeah, I think this is another fold. So yeah, I mean, lots of line checks here, lots of folds that are actually folds going on. Not really seeing that many mistakes in these hands that you've marked here, to be honest. They all look really solid so far. I think you're just kind of running bad across the sample given what you've shown me. Fish donks out here, I'd absolutely just call, let them destroy themselves in this spot. Basically, you're in position, there's no urgency, don't raise. Excellent job. And same thing on the turn. I mean, you could jam here, but I think in position, I mean, there's more denial now, right? There's a bit of diamonds, there's some king jack and stuff. I think I'd still call. I think the letting them crucify themselves thing is way more important than the rushing of value here. Love it. And I would absolutely just call off based on the fact that this is a volatile, spewy line. I'm never folding here. Great job. You ran into a set, another complete. I don't like the word cooler because it's like we're drawing this giant line in the sand between like things that are our fault and things that aren't, and it's not like that. Poker's murkier, it's more gradable, but if cooler is ever possible to apply, this is it. So yeah, this is good. All right, shall we wrap it there? We'll come back with the next installment where we'll focus in on your red line. We'll try and get that fixed and get this passivity issue eradicated, get the red line not winning but stabilized, and continue our quest from losing to cruising. Sound good?
Thanks, mate.
All right, see you next time.